The mainstream media looks for something bad to say about Donald Trump, regardless of whether the situation is true or not true, whether he's involved or not. As long as they can somehow pin it on Trump, they're going to do it. Believe it or not, they've now taken advantage of the horrors of Hurricane Florence, a national disaster, and are using it as propaganda to blame President Trump's actions on the Paris Accord for causing the hurricane. I'm going to show you they're totally wrong. Maybe they also think Trump has such a close relationship with God that he inspired God to build the hurricane. They're so fraudulently crazy. I'm surprised they didn't say that Russia had something to do with it. That's how sick they've gotten.
We have a president that is denying the impacts of this hurricane season last year and this year, and actively making the problem worse by not addressing this root cause of worsening storms.
I think you're elevating Trump to evil, whereas I just think he's a giant toddler with no real connection to reality.
It's important to remember that just 6 companies own 90% of our media, and they've gotten many political favors under the Democratic regime, and I guess they want the Democrats to get back in control as soon as they can. The Washington Post came out with an article titled, "Another Hurricane is About to Batter Our Coast. Trump is complicit," they said. He's complicit because President Trump doesn't bend over backwards to support climate change. So they're spreading this nasty propaganda that he's to blame. Now, if they did a little research, they'd find out that statistics don't lie. From 1915 to 1965, worldwide, there were 132 hurricanes. From 1966 to 2016, also 50 years, worldwide, there were 120 hurricanes. So the actual number worldwide has gone down. So much for their climate warming theory. Now, it's true that although there were many less hurricanes, the damage of each hurricane has been greater. But that's because the number of houses and buildings built along the coast is greater in recent times because of better construction techniques.
It was a device to try to get countries like China and India, who are now developing countries, to actually also set guidelines. It's voluntary. No. That's why it was stupid to get out. This proves that Donald Trump does not give a damn about the world. He does not give a damn about the United States as a whole. The short-sighted stupidity.
But again, no matter what Donald Trump does, MSNBC, especially Joe Scarborough, who's being paid over $7 million a year, and his sidekick Mika, are all involved. But if he would be a true reporter and do some research like a true reporter is supposed to do, he'd find out how wrong he is. Now, what I found is that this true information is so readily available, I see it as further proof about the need for my videos, and that's why I'm doing them. I want to expose the truth and the fraudulent mainstream media. I feel they're either ignorant or intentionally misinforming us. Now, I really don't think the media is ignorant, so it's got to be the latter. Now, I'm going to show you the truth in this video. Let's go. First of all, China is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Under the Paris Accord, they made no commitment to reduce emissions until 2030. And India, the third largest emitter, made no commitment until it receives multi-billion dollars of aid, mostly from the U.S., of course. And Russia, the fourth largest emitter, said it would not comply with the agreement until 2019 or later. Now, who knows when later will be? Frankly, the government economy is based on their oil resources. So they have an incentive not to comply. They want to see the use of oil. So it's just baloney what they put in. This agreement also does not eliminate dirty coal production or its use in other countries, and does not provide for clean coal, which is an answer. Now listen, China is allowed to increase their emissions under the agreement for a staggering 13 years. Now, even though these countries were committing nothing, the United States was required to cut its CO2 emissions to 26% below 2005 levels by 2025. Staying in the Paris Accord, according to the National Economic Research Associates, would cost the United States as many as 2.7 million jobs by 2025, and it would increase our electricity costs by requiring the U.S. power sector to rely on higher cost energy sources. Now listen to this is important. Even if the Paris Agreement were implemented the way it was negotiated, the way it was poorly negotiated, even if there was total compliance from all nations, which was very unlikely, since there were no commitments by anyone other than the United States, it's estimated that it would only produce a 0.2 degree Celsius reduction in global temperatures. That's all. By the year 2100. That's a very, very tiny, tiny amount that they could have done a lot better with these negotiations. Even though the United States withdrew from the agreement, it still plans to live up to what it agreed to in the agreement. It's doing its share, it's doing its job, and it plans to cut domestic greenhouse gas emissions 26% below 2005 levels by 2025. Trump's going to do what he can to make this happen during the 4 or 8 years that he's in power, and hopefully 8 years. But Trump wants to get the other large emitters to guarantee to cut their emission levels. Now look at this chart. You'll find it interesting. This was prepared in 2017. This shows how phony the MSNBC reporting is. It shows that America has the largest decline of CO2 emissions in the world. It's right at the top of the chart. Largest decline. And that has happened in the last 2 years under, of course, the Trump administration. So we're reducing our CO2 emissions without the Paris Accord. Now look at this. China and India have been increasing their CO2 emissions the most. In fact, China has had the world's largest increase in CO2 emissions every year this century, except for 4 years. Russia and the other European Union countries that are all complaining about Trump pulling out of the agreement have also been increasing their CO2 emissions. Why don't they stop complaining and do something? The biased media should have been reporting on how outrageously horrible the past administration's negotiations were for America. Shame on MSNBC, shame on CNN, shame on ABC, shame on NBC, and all the other biased media. So Trump was 100% correct pulling out of the Paris Accord.